All right. Peace and greetings, YouTubers. So, welcome to another edition of In the News. You know what's crazy? I was only gone for 4 or 5 days, but it seemed like so much happened in that little span of time. And I couldn't do a video like I wanted to because normally when I travel, I don't bring my cameras and stuff with me. Like I said on my page that I was going to be in LA, so I wasn't going to be able to get you guys a video until probably Wednesday or Thursday. But, you know, I don't like traveling with my cameras or the sound system and all that because that stuff is expensive. And no disrespect to the people who work at the airports and the airlines, but the way that they toss them bags sometimes and stuff gets broke and stuff goes missing, like, knowing me, I'd probably fight everybody at the airport. So then my next video would be from Cell Block 8 with me trying to raise money for a lawyer because I done fought everybody at baggage claims. So it's better that I just leave my stuff here. And so I just want to cover a few stories. This one's not really going to be a happy, funny video. It's just more so a few things I have some concerns about. But first, I wanted to cover this story. It's more so, it's not old, but I think it's current, but we're not really hearing about it. And that's Danye Jones. Now, if you remember in 2014, everything with Ferguson happened. You had the Mike Brown situation happen. You saw the police officer pretty much get off. You saw the protesting. And there's been a series of interesting events to take place since then. There's been a handful of people who have mysteriously died or who have died under unique circumstances that just don't really add up. And so with Danye Jones was found hanging from a tree, allegedly in his backyard. And the police were trying to say, oh, it was a suicide. He killed himself. And his mother is convinced, like, absolutely not. No, I don't believe so. Now, Danye Jones was one of the people who were an activist or was an activist as far as, you know, fighting against police brutality and making sure that the rights of the people are adhered to. And so he was an activist, and he apparently hung himself is what the police were saying. And then the mother saying, no, things don't add up because, you know, his pants were rolled down, so maybe he could have even been sexually assaulted. He had different bruises on other parts of his body, and things just don't add up to the mother. The mother's saying, no, my child would have not killed himself, and even if they killed himself, they wouldn't have done it in this manner. So things don't add up to her. But the thing that makes it even more interesting is there's been 3 other prominent activists coming out of Ferguson who are all dead. You know, so you had Edward Crawford, who was found shot in the head in his car, and then you had Darren Seals, who was also found shot, and his car was set on fire, and then you also had DeAndre Joshua, who also was shot, and their car was set on fire. And so it just makes you question what's going on. You know, something is not adding up. And to be honest, I personally believe that there is some kind of cover-up going on, especially on the side of law enforcement, because I'm not trying to be the one to shake the table, but things don't add up. And Ferguson is already the smaller section of town, so when you have a similar crime happen so often in the same area with the same circumstances with people who are all indirectly connected with each other, things don't add up. And when I talk about the whole idea of the suicide, the reason I find that suspicious is because there have been other instances where individuals have been found dead and the police ruled their death as a suicide, when in reality, there was something else that was going on. It just made me think of Victor White. And Victor White was in Louisiana. And he was arrested because, you know, they found, I think, a bag of weed. They found a little bit of weed in a small bag of cocaine. And so they arrested him. He was handcuffed, put in the back of the police cruiser. And then somehow he died. And the police said, oh, he shot himself and committed suicide in the backseat of the car. And you're like, wait a minute. So you mean to tell me that after you frisked this guy, you know, you did the frisking, you know, the pat down and, you know, and you know, because the police are very thorough with making sure that before they put anybody in the back of the car, everything is checked for. So this person was able to make it past the frisking, was handcuffed with their hands behind their back, and somehow magically pulled out a gun and was able to maneuver the gun, cock it back, aim it perfectly, and shoot himself in the head and killed himself. Something doesn't add up. And the judges in the courts also felt that same way, and there was actually a settlement about all of that, because it turned out that the information that the police had put out was incorrect. And in reality, he wasn't shot in the back of the head. He was shot in the front of the head, which would be pretty hard to do if you're handcuffed. And, you know, y'all tell me how to make this work if you're trying to, I don't know how. So, you know, even if you try to aim and put your head, that's a lot of work. So, and you know, so a lot of that just didn't add up. And then even with that, it was like, who, not to try to play, you know, mind control person, but who kills himself over a marijuana charge and cocaine and marijuana charge? Like, when you're looking at the logistics of what kind of time he would have done, it wasn't going to be something overtly extensive. And so it wasn't anything to end your life over, in my opinion. And again, I can't play in the minds of anybody else, but it just didn't seem that this individual killed himself. And so looking at something like the Victor White situation and comparing it to the Danye Jones situation, it's like there's a lot of things that just make me question a lot. And really it's because a lot of the activists who have been very active in a lot of these movements, especially in Ferguson, they've come out and said they're constantly getting death threats. They feel like they're always being watched. There's an individual who I personally know who during the protest in Ferguson, they got shot in the forehead. Fortunately, it was by one of the little rubber bullets and everything like that. But, you know, it was still a certain little situation and some stuff that followed them. And, you know, they got a little bit of media press and everything like that. But I remember them making a bunch of posts on social media saying, okay, something is going on. I feel like somebody keeps hacking into my computer and following my every footsteps and hacking into my social media. Like, there's lots of different things that happen. And I believe it because, hell, I get death threats just from this channel. And I don't even be doing too much. You know, I'd say my 2 cents and I go on to sleep. And I'm getting all kind of death to you and I'll come find you. And okay. So imagine the perspective of what it's like to be somebody who's actively fighting against a corrupt system and they're the face of it, you know. So I can see all kind of things. I don't really know what theory to take, but it could be that there's some foul play. It could be that if they did kill themselves, it was because there was just so much craziness going on that they just lost their minds, because there's a lot of people who are in these movements who do lose their minds because it's extremely exhausting and it's frustrating to constantly fight against, you know, you're literally fighting an army with a slingshot. So that's what it feels like. So, you know, I'm not sure the logistics, but there seems to be foul play in this to me. And when you talk about the mother's account of what she saw with the son's body and just everything and how she believes her son, even if he were to kill himself, wasn't going to be in that kind of manner, things just don't add up. And when you just look at Ferguson, which, you know, there's been a lot of civil unrest, and I'm not just talking about the residents who are fighting against everything, but I'm talking about those who are trying to cover up a lot of things. Because even when you go back to that Mike Brown situation and you look at everything that happened with the grand jury, there was so much nonsense that happened with that. And I've done a video on it, so I'm not even about to revisit that for the sake of my sanity. But it's interesting, especially when you just take into account what happened with Darren Seals. Like, that Darren Seals thing was crazy. You know, you finding these people shot and then burnt up in the car. These people are specifically targeted. You know, and these aren't random acts of violence. And some people say, oh, you know, they live in Ferguson, it's the hood. Black people shoot each other all the time. Not quite, especially when you're talking about people who tend to be activists in their community. Even when you come from some of the toughest of neighborhoods, a lot of times the community respects you when they know that you're fighting for them. And so you can't use the narrative, oh, well, they the hood, this is what happened. No, I don't buy that, because everybody knew who those individuals were and had a respect for them because they were fighting for the people. And so those aren't people who normally are targets of violent crime from an intraracial perspective. So yeah, save that. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes, but you know, it's very disturbing. You know, a lot of people who go against the status quo end up missing or dead, and it's crazy. And I think that's why you have a lot of people who are afraid to speak out on certain things. You know, we're now in a space where speaking out against injustices that happen to your community, in this day and age, it can get you fired from your job. It can get you killed. It can get you arrested. It can make you public enemy number one. It can get you blacklisted. Like, all kind of things happen, especially if you're doing it on social media. You know, automatically, you shake the table and open that door, all kind of trolls just run through, and it's a field day. So, I mean, for a lot of people, they're just like, I don't want that smoke. There's a lot of people who just run from it, unfortunately. And it's crazy that we're in a position where you can't be yourself, and anything that you fight for, you know, in regards to the betterment of your community, oftentimes you're looked at as public enemy number one. And people who don't understand your plight and your struggle with the walk that you walk in, you know, they look at everything from a judgmental standpoint and think that everything that you're doing is just in your head. You're just envisioning things. You're being a race baiter. I think I was called a race pimp on Twitter today. Race pimp. I said, oh, that's a new one. I'm going to start using that. Race pimp. Kind of has a ring to it. Race pimp. All right. I'll take it. But, you know, so it we'll see what kind of happens with that. And then I know you all have heard about this story, or at least seen the clip, where you have that teacher who lays that student out in the classroom, where pretty much the student decided they want to be big and bad and buck up at the teacher, walk up on the teacher, throw their basketball at the teacher, cuss the teacher out, call the teacher all kind of N-words, because the teacher was an older black man, the student was a young Latino kid, cussing that teacher out, all kind of N-words, walking up on the teacher, all in the teacher's personal space, provoking the teacher, pretty much challenging him to fight. What you want to do? You ain't this, you know, this close to the teacher's, like right here in the teacher's face, like when those siblings of yours are doing the, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you. Like, all of that for like a good 2 minutes. And finally the teacher was like, okay, you know what? You want to show that's what you're asking for? Okay, here we go. Boom, special delivery via FedEx. And I mean, that teacher laid that kid, drugged that kid all up and through the classroom to the point where people had to come and break it up. And so here's my 2 cents. If I'm being transparent, had I been a student in the classroom that day and I had to sit and witness that, listen, that kid would have got banged out on my behalf. The teacher wouldn't have had to do anything because I would have jumped in just because. Like, literally, that kid and I would have been wrecking because, like, there are just certain things that get under my skin. And by the way, I bet you that kid won't do that anymore. He done learned. I bet you he learned because he definitely, not only is it embarrassing for you to go and do all that, then you lose. That's what you get. But here's the thing. Teachers don't get paid enough for the nonsense they already have to deal with. You know what I mean? And for me, there's a special place in my heart for anybody who's willing to make a lifetime sacrifice. And when I'm talking about lifetime sacrifice, I'm talking about the fact that people who work in a lot of services that work or service the public, like whether you're a social worker or you're a teacher or you work in the after school programs or you do community centers like I do. A lot of times people in those fields, they have pretty much accepted that for pretty much the duration of their work experience in that field, they're going to be getting paid in increments of struggle just so they can help some unappreciative, ignorant teenager learn how to read. You know, just so they can help somebody who doesn't even appreciate what it is that they're doing for them. You know, just for them to not get a thank you, just for them to be told that they're the worst teacher in the world, just for them to be overworked all the time and underpaid and have to pay out of pocket to do their own job. You know, just to go and have to use their own money to buy pencils or buy, you know, stuff like that. And so when I see people burn the wrong bridges, it kills me. You know, first of all, who fights the band teacher? It was the band teacher. You know what I mean? Usually students like the band teacher. If there's any set of teachers at a school that most of the students usually like as a collective, it's the band teacher. The theater teacher is always pretty cool. If the school has a creative writing class, it's the creative writing teacher. If the school has like a leadership class for students that are in like student government, it's the leadership teacher. The choir teacher is kind of half and half. Some people love the choir teacher. A lot of people can't stand the choir teacher. I don't know why. You know, those are the ones that everybody loves, you know, because those are the ones most likely, if there's a school assembly or something, they're the ones with the mic and trying to prep up everybody and get everybody happy. Like, those are the teachers that everybody loves, especially something like music, you know. And so for you to go and pop off on the band teacher, like, sir, if you don't sit there and play your little Beethoven or Hot Cross Buns or Phantom of the Opera or whatever y'all are working on and sit down somewhere, like, I don't buy the hardcore band member theory. Like, you can't be hardcore and you in the band, okay? You better get it. You better stand in line and do those formations that they do at the games and play a little clarinet. Like, come on, man. And so I can't. And again, teachers just don't get paid enough for the stuff that they have to deal with. And I mean, because there's some really, really good ones out there. Like, I mean, really good teachers. I'm not talking about the ones that just they shouldn't be teaching in the first place, but I'm talking about those good ones. And when you watch them get disrespected, it drives me crazy. And this kid is not the only one. I've seen so many clips of students like physically try to fight their teachers. And I think what makes it worse is when you see teachers who are older, who've been doing it for 20 or 30 years, and maybe they're not in the best of health anymore, or, you know, maybe they got a bad knee or something, and, you know, maybe at this point they've gained a lot of weight, and then you see some young, able-bodied 15 or 16-year-old just literally wail on a teacher. I'm just like, why? But, you know, I think the element that you get out of this, there's so many elements with that clip. The thing I couldn't get past this kid calling his teacher the N-word every 5 seconds. Because I don't know if you all saw what I saw, but it drove me crazy. And here's the thing. In 2018, a lot of black teenagers are so passive about other kids of different races using the N-word, because for them, like, at this point, there's two elements or two sides to the spectrum. A lot of teenagers just don't care. For them, it's like, it is what it is. It's a new culture. It's 2018 and this, that, and the third. And they have their own viewpoints on that. I don't agree, but I'm like, listen, if that's how y'all want to see the world, more power to you. And then on the other side, you got some teenagers who are like, oh, heck no, it's on site right then and there. But what got me is this. You know, you have an entire generation of people who have grown up in an era where they think that's okay, that if you're not black, you can go and say the N-word to other people just because you done listen to a few hip-hop songs, and now all of a sudden you think you got street cred, even though you're still in a band. But my thing is this. You know, for me, to watch some 15 or 16-year-old kid have the audacity to go up to an older black man and consistently and constantly call him the N-word, like, there's a disconnect. Now, I recognize that the teenagers amongst themselves, for some of them, it doesn't bother them. It's cool. But when you go out of your way to go to somebody who comes out of an era where that word still carries so much power, to me, it still carries power. It's up to you to decide what you want it to mean. And I don't mean it carries power as in if somebody calls me that, it hurts my feelings. To me, if somebody calls me that, that means that they recognize that there is a system of white supremacy that they're living under, and they currently believe that I am somebody who's inferior under that system. So the minute somebody calls me that crap, my feelings aren't hurt. It's just like, okay, I see where you stand, so you know what? But, for you to go and do that to an older teacher who's probably had to live through Jim Crow and everything else, and you not even respecting his plight as a black man, I have an issue with. I'm like, that's why I think if I would have been in that classroom as a student, I would have just beat the kid up myself, just for the teacher, just so the teacher could still have his job. Because, that is just an element of disrespect. And then the part that makes it even funnier, this kid is like 120 pounds and really thought he could stand a chance with his teacher. This is the thing I've said before. You never underestimate the strength of older black men, because for some reason there's a thing called old man strength that they have. And I mean, every single time I don't know if it's from running from bricks as a child and having to stay on their side of the track growing up, but I mean, there's just this internal strength that comes. And I knew what was going to happen. I was like, if this teacher loses his cool, it's not going to be good for that kid. And I mean, that kid got drugged up and down the class. And the other issue I had is all them students in the class, all of them thought that crap was funny. Nobody said anything. They're all just sitting there chilling and recording because, in this day and age, you bring out the camera, it's about to go down now. And they thought it was so funny, and nobody had a problem with, him calling the teacher the N-word and everything. And then as soon as the teacher starts wailing on the kid, now they all want to start screaming and they're rushing to break it up. And I'm like, why didn't y'all check your friend when he was out of pocket to begin with? Again, who's fighting the band teacher? I just can't get past the fighting the band teacher. The band teachers are usually the cool teachers, but dang, the disrespect and the lack of understanding for the plight of the black struggle in this country drives me crazy. Especially, I just can't do it. And then for that guy, here's the thing. I'm not going to 100% justify him laying the teacher out, but I felt everything he felt that day. Everything he did is what I would want to do if I was in that situation. Now, unfortunately, in my field of work, I can't do that. And I have a different experience because my kids, one, that's never going to happen because my kids actually like me. And I'm not saying they don't like that teacher, but whatever was going on with that kid, I don't know. But it's, I don't know, that's tough. But you just never know what kind of day a person's having. That's why I'm always saying, don't walk up into somebody's personal space trying to shake the table, because you never know how they're going to respond. You don't know what's been going on that day. That teacher that day might have said, this is going to be my last day. Because from what I read, that wasn't the first time there's been some kind of incident with that teacher. And from what I'm looking at, when I'm looking at the demographics of the school, I don't know if he's the odd man out as far as where he comes from and who he's teaching. I don't know if that has anything to do with it. But, to sit there and try to emasculate your teacher who's trying to help you out in band class, and you want to sit here and try to be big and bad and raise upon a teacher. And the part when he threw the basketball at him, I was like, crazy times, huh? And then as far as the midterms, I have mixed feelings. There's some good. I think the good is that you saw a lot of everyday, ordinary people step up to the plate and say, look, I don't like what's going on. I want to do something about it, so I'm going to run for office. And you saw a lot of people run for office and unseat people who had been in their position for decades, who, they decided, listen, this isn't working. You're claiming to represent us, but you're not really doing your job effectively. And some of you are just sitting there getting paid to do nothing. And so, listen, if you can't do it, I'll do it properly and fight for, my own community. And so you saw a lot of people unseat people who had been incumbents for years. So, even with the Lauren Underwood out of Illinois, she was a registered nurse, just an everyday person, and she decided that she wanted to make some change, and so she went and did it. And that's one of the things. I think, for me, I'm just a bit more trusting when I see politicians who I can almost relate to, where, one of the things I always do when I'm looking at different candidates, you call me crazy, but I look at their net worth. I see what they got in the bank account, how much money they make. Because if they're sitting on $20 or $30 million, it's hard for me to think that you can understand the plight of my experience as somebody who sits on the lower end of the middle class or the upper end of the working class. I can't see you relating to my plight and my experience. So it's harder for me to just go out and support you because, to be honest, I don't trust you. And so there's that. And then you see that the House flipped. And, if I were a newly elected Democrat who just flipped a seat in the House, my main goal, or even if I didn't flip a seat, even if I just stayed or I kept the party and whatever, my main goal would be to make sure that I do everything I said I'll do for my district. My main goal would make sure would be to make sure that my district is happy with me, because I'm going to have to go up for election again. And so, I think what's happening, what you're witnessing, because people kept saying, oh, the blue wave. And I'm like, oh, it was kind of a wave. I don't think it was a whole blue wave. I think it was kind of just, with politics, I said this before, the pendulum always swings back and forth. And so now the pendulum is starting to swing in the other direction. But what always happens with these races is, the pendulum swings one way because everybody's pissed off on the other side. And so all these new people get in. And rather than focus on their districts and do, some of the things that they want to do, they spend too much energy just trying to take down who's at the top. And then nothing happens, and the pendulum swings the other way for the next election. And then the people on the other side do the exact same thing. Now listen, I'm all team get Trump and his whole administration out of here. I can't wait. I hope it happens. But in addition to that, that can't be the only thing that you run on. If you ran for some specific district and you said you're going to do this with the schools and do this with the healthcare, do this with the local, and I'm talking local stuff. I'm not just talking about what's going on at the federal level, but even just in those local districts, you need to actually pull that weight. And I think as black people as a collective, these people that a lot of us have put in office, you need to hold them to the fire. Don't just, because a lot of them just show up for voting time. They'll show up to the churches during election season and sing Amazing Grace, and then they'll show up at the neighborhood block party and do the electric slide, because, a few of us got Soul Train syndrome. All it takes is a person to do a two-step and they got our vote. But I'm like, okay, now that you've given your vote, hold them to the fire and let them know that you can be replaced. This is not permanent. You know what I mean? Like, really make sure that they're going to do what it is that they do, because a lot of times we get presented with this dream list of priorities that are going to take place. And, we start out at like number 2 or 3 on the priority list. And by the time they get in office, we drop down to like number 429, section C. And then, it's like you don't even hear from half your representatives. And then come election season, it's round 2 and they're back. And then they tell you, oh, you got to vote. Listen, just to have it together. That's all I'm going to say. But as far as the other side, there were some things I found disturbing. Like Texas, I'm like, what are y'all doing? I really thought Cruz was out of there. And I say that because Cruz hasn't done anything in the last 6 years. He was so pressed to be president, he forgot that he was, that he was a senator. And in my opinion, he hasn't done a lot for the state of Texas. So I just knew they were going to get him out of there, especially with, what's his name, Beto, the newer guy, who really tried to appease everyone and do everything. He still lost. But I will say, seeing that he came that close, I'm like, people in Texas, y'all need to, clearly the pendulum is starting to swing in Texas too. But I think what's disturbing, of course, is Florida and Georgia, the governor's race. With Georgia, it's disturbing because you literally witnessed the voter suppression. And I talked about that a few videos ago. We talked about the absentee ballots being thrown away in Gwinnett County. We talked about the million people being purged off the voter rolls. You saw all of that happening. Brian Kemp was pulling out all the stops. Even the night before the election, you saw him make that post where it was like the new Black Panther Party and they were holding the guns and he's like, this is who Stacy Abrams supports, and trying to rack up the fear. Brian Kemp pulled out all the stops. Anything he could do to corrupt that election. And I'm like, listen, if you're as good as you say you are, the people will come out for you. You shouldn't have to be trying to strip away the rights of people to vote and everything. And they do that on purpose because they know if you can disenfranchise certain groups of people and make it extremely hard to vote, and they're from the other demographic that most likely is not going to vote for you anyway, get them on out of the way, you can go ahead and win. Because a lot of these extremely crazy candidates are literally, the only thing that is holding on or helping them stay afloat is white racism. Literally, that's the only leg they have to stand on. Can we be honest? And so I think watching the Sidney Abrams race and watching Andrew Gillum is like, man, it's so reflective of just being black in America. Can we be honest? You watch two individuals, all these qualifications, who tried to reach across the aisle, which I always say, at this point, forget it. One day y'all gonna learn. People gonna always show you who they are. So, if you look at the demographics of who voted for who with both of those races and in Texas as well, it's just like, But anyway, my point with that being said again, though, is you see these people with all these great accolades, and especially with Gillum, you saw he was very transparent with the platform that he had and what he wanted to do. And again, wasn't good enough. And when you look at what the other candidates had to offer, other than scare tactics, they didn't really have platforms. Brian Kemp's platform was, I got guns and we're going to do this, that, and the third. And he's the same guy who just, God, he was such an idiot. I was like, Georgia, really? And then I had to remember, well, it is the South. I don't know what you were expecting. Once you get out of those metropolitan cities, it's the logic. I'm not trying to diss anybody who lives in rural areas from those areas, but goodness, it was just a little disappointing to see that. But it's almost like you knew it was going to happen. You wanted to see some change, but I was like, this is America, and that's Florida, and Georgia's just down the street. So, I don't know. But with Stacey Abrams, I honestly think, had there not been so much voter suppression, I think she honestly could have taken it. And from what I'm reading, they're still kind of going back and forth with it, and there may possibly be a runoff or a recount or whatever they got going. Because right now, they're looking at the whatchamacallit ballots. What's the name of that? Provisional ballots. They're trying to dig up the provisional ballots. They're looking at the absentee ballots that may have been thrown away because there was so much nonsense that happened. I don't get how you can have somebody oversee their own election. That's a conflict of interest to me. Like, I don't know how that's even legal, but whatever. And then as far as Florida, like, y'all, DeSantis, I didn't see a strong platform coming from him. And it's not just because these people are black and I wanted them to win. That plays a role into as far as what they fought for aligns with a lot of what I would have stood up with. But you just didn't see. I don't get it. I'm tired of watching people vote against their own interests. It's the most interesting thing. And it just goes to show, again, identity politics goes across the board with every race in this country. People keep trying to just put it on black folks and say, well, black folks are the ones who do identity politics. Everybody else just votes. But no, clearly it's showing you identity politics is a thing, because the results of Florida, Texas, and Georgia look extremely similar to the results of 2016 presidential election when you talk about the demographics of who voted for what. But anyway, and of course, I have to say this too, because this was the other thing that was driving me crazy. There were so many Twitter warriors who were, don't vote, I don't vote till the system is nonsense, blah, 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 blah. Here's the thing. We know America is corrupt. We know it's some nonsense. A lot of times there's candidates who suck. But my response to that, because there were so many people going out of the way to tell everybody not to vote, and now that I've seen what happened in Texas, seen what happened in Georgia, seen what happened in Florida, where all of the races were within a small margin, where literally there could have been any kind of major change. It's like, you have to understand that your vote still does matter. And that's why I think with Florida, now that they've passed that what is it, Amendment 4 or whatever it is, where people who were convicted felons will now get the right to vote again. That's like 1 million plus people. I'm like, that's definitely going to change the dynamics of what happens in Florida. Unless Florida starts tripping and they start trying to make up some stuff like, oh no, your conviction had to be from before 1970 in order for you to get your voting rights back. I could see them doing some crap like that. But everything counts. And I think people are so pressed about the larger presidential election and even the House and the Senate, which is cool. But I'm like, really, for me, the local ones are what I worry about. And so when I hear people say, I don't vote, a bunch of coons, y'all voting for your oppression and everything like that, I'm like, here's the thing. America has a lot of problems, but my thing is, rather than sit out and be a spectator and then end up being collateral because everybody else made the choice for you, learn the tricks of the game and outsmart the people who make the rules. You know exactly when the elections take place. You know exactly that. For 2 years from now, there's a presidential election. 4 years from now, there's another midterm. If you hate every single candidate that's out there because you think they're all bought out, this is the perfect time for you to get together with people who share your same viewpoints. Find a candidate and go ahead and already start prepping for how you would launch that campaign and get them into office. Get the people that you want to get into office. You know what I mean? Like, do what it is you would need to do to bring that attention. But it's like so many people just sit back and they just want to be Twitter warriors. And it's like a woke Olympics, but there's no, it's woke without action. I don't vote. And the thing that pisses me off is because I think I work in a field that is heavily dependent on what happens with our governments. I can't sit here and just sit back and watch, because that means I may not have a job, or that means that the people who I serve and work with may not have the resources that they currently have. And so it's important to me, at least. And like even with the 19 black judges that were like stuff like that is important. When you're not voting for who's going to be the appointed judge in your district, who's not going to be the sheriff in your district, who's not going to be over the school board in your district, things like that directly affect you. Like that, you can literally walk to the money, walk to the vote. You know what I mean? As far as the people that are in charge, the buck literally stops down the street from your house. And you mean to tell me you're too woke to even vote for that? It just makes me question. And it makes me think, because when I was 17 and I had graduated from high school, I'm from Washington State. And so I went to a school called Spanaway Lake High School. And that year, it was a levy and bond year. In Washington State, they have a levy. The levy is pretty much the voters vote on whether or not to continue to fund the schools, pretty much. And then the bond is, that's extra money for the schools. If they want to do renovations, this, that, and the third. And so where I lived, I went to Spanaway Lake High School. Spanaway Lake High School, the way that it was built in 1985, for some reason, the roof was improperly built. And so every time it rained, we had to put buckets in the hallways. And then when they came and did a safety assessment, because there's also seismic activity in that area, they pretty much said if we had any more larger earthquakes, that school, the ceiling may collapse in, as well as parts of the gym may collapse and stuff like that. And so there was levy and bond, and there's 2 opportunities for the levy and bond to pass. They have an election and people vote yes or no. And if everybody votes no, then there's one more shot for them to go and vote again. So the end of my senior year, levy, and I talked about this in my podcast, I think, but it's levy and bond. They both fail, the levy and the bond, which now means, okay, teachers are going to have to cut back on after school hours. The sports programs are going to be affected. There's not going to be money for renovation, all kind of crazy things. And literally what we had to do, because at the time I was student body president, and this was a school district thing. It wasn't just a school. It was going to affect all the schools in the area. Literally, myself, and maybe like 10 or 11 other seniors who were all graduating. Literally, we started a whole campaign to get people who were going to be 18 before the next levy and bond vote to register to vote so they could vote for the levy and bond. And actually, the bond and levy both passed by less than 100 votes. And it was literally because of the work that some of us had did, just going knocking. I mean, we were knocking on doors, getting cussed out, people sitting dogs on us. I had to go in some of them backwoods trailer parks knocking on doors. And that's back when I had cornrows. So, I was scaring people. Hello, hi, you voting? So, but my point is, people always say my vote doesn't count, or you're voting for oppression, or you're voting into the system. Listen, you still live here. You still pay taxes into the same system that you claim is oppressing you. Even if you want to be super, super woke all day, you pay taxes. And even if you avoid paying taxes, as far as filing, you pay taxes every time you go to the grocery store, every time you go to freaking Walmart or wherever you shop. I'm just if you want to challenge the system, cool. But do something. Don't just sit here and criticize the people who are at least trying to somewhat make their lives make sense. For me, I don't blindly follow any politician, and I don't think that just because somebody gets in office, all is well. For me, when I vote for anybody, it's just saying, okay, they're going to make life a little less difficult while I figure everything else out on my own. I don't expect any politician to give me a red carpet rollout and make my life extremely easy. I just expect politicians to keep stability and make sure that everything makes sense while I do everything else on my own. That's how I look at politics. And so for me, it's just disappointing to see so many people who have vowed to not sit back because the stuff is rigged, and it's just I'm done with this. Every time we do this, we get rigged. But the ones who have just made an effort to say, don't even vote, it's a waste of time. I'm gonna just say this. Do what you do. Do what you do. However, if you choose to sit back and do nothing and just be critical the whole time, just recognize that there are some people who end up being collateral because you decided to just do nothing. And I'm not trying to shame people who don't vote. It's more so the people who don't vote and then tell everybody else not to vote. If you don't want to vote, don't vote. That's fine. Do you. Nobody's forcing you to do it, but don't go out of your way and discourage other people who, because like I said, I think the local elections are extremely important, especially when it comes to things surrounding the judicial system. Those court-appointed judges, it's important to get the right people in there because they're up there for life. They're up there for, extremely long time, and you never know what kind of case happens. So then, when you have a crappy judicial system, that's how you can have something like a Darren Scott get off for killing Mike Brown and everything like that. You know what I mean? So, anyway, I feel like this video's been long. I'm going to bed. My voice is even going out. I feel like being in the plane, when you're on a plane and they have that compressed air, it just dries out everything. I've been tired all day, and work was torture today, and it was a quiet day, and I still had a headache. But anyway, I'm out. Subscribe.